بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Last week we talked about the Hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how he made the preparations for the Hijrah along with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. We also talked about the route that the Prophet ﷺ took to make the Hijrah, and it was an opposite route. This is a graph that some of the scholars came up with, or a map that some of the scholars came up with to show the green is the normal Hijrah, the red is the normal route, the normal highway, whatever you want to call it. So from Makkah, right here, to Medina al-Munawwara, the blessed city. So this is the route that they normally took. Okay, this was the route that they would take to Medina and even up north. So it would just extend. Now the Prophet ﷺ, we mentioned he went south first. He stayed in Ghar Thawr, which is the cave of Thawr. And he stayed there for 3 nights. And Quraysh, initially they pursued him thinking that he was going up north, but then they found out that actually he's going south. So then they sent down a dispatch to go and chase him and Abu Bakr and his guide, Abdullah ibn Urayqit. Right, so there was 3 people that were helping the Prophet ﷺ. It was Asma, the daughter of the Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the sister-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ, her brother Abdullah ibn Abu Bakr, and also a guide. So there was 3 people who were helping the Prophet ﷺ, and each one of them had their own duty to fulfill. Asma would bring them food for the next 3 days. Abdullah, his Abu Bakr's son, would bring him news because he was young. People wouldn't be suspicious of him. He was smart. He could go ahead and do a lot of things without people suspecting him. And actually, there was 4. There was another one who was a shepherd, and he would go ahead and erase the footprints. He would go ahead and erase the footprints of Abdullah ibn Abu Bakr and Asma, who would go ahead and bring news and food to the Prophet ﷺ. There's also a report where, and I think this is mentioned in some of the books, especially the Sealed Nectar and When the Moon Split, is that Abu Jahl confronted Asma, who was about 20 years old, roughly around 20 years old, or maybe a little bit less. But he confronted her and said, "Where is your father? Where is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?" And she refused to tell him, and he smacked her so hard that blood started gushing from her head. But she did not waver, and she did not give in, and did not disclose it. So Abu Jahl, may Allah's curse be upon him, was that type of a man. Out of desperation, he would go ahead and even beat up and hit a woman. So the green is the route that the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr took, and you could see that it zigzags, completely opposite. And there are instances that occurred, and we mentioned one of them was Suraqa, the Bedouin, how even though he was not a Qurayshi, he was not from Makkah, but he heard about the bounty that was placed on the Prophet ﷺ and his companion Abu Bakr. And so the Prophet so they could not he could not reach them or even get near to them, and the exchange happened that you see the Prophet ﷺ who's walking and who's fleeing from Makkah, but yet he's reciting the Quran and he has complete tawakkul. And that brings us to a very important point, and that is, once you have taken all of your necessary precautions, once you have taken all of the necessary precautions, and we know the Prophet ﷺ, he took all the precautions, he took all the arrangements for his hijrah, okay? And then he made complete tawakkul on Allah. So we look at the cave, for example. The Prophet ﷺ was in the cave. That's a precaution. That is a means to protect yourself. Okay? So it wasn't like he was like, okay, come and catch me. You guys can't catch me because Allah, He's going to protect me. He went to the cave. He went and he did that precaution. And he took that means of safeguarding himself, and then his complete serenity, and this is mentioned, where he is in the cave, and Abu Bakr, he is so anxious and he is so worried that the Prophet ﷺ, he's so worried, but yet the Prophet ﷺ, he's just completely at rest. Why? Because he did all the necessary things that a human is supposed to do, and then he put his tawakkul in Allah. And even we find this when he is walking, right? And so, and he doesn't even look back, whereas Abu Bakr, he keeps on looking back to see who is following him. That's how anxious he is. And of course, the iman of the Prophet ﷺ is far greater and higher than the iman of Abu Bakr. Right? And it could be said that Abu Bakr was not so much concerned about himself than he was about the Prophet. So we could say that he was actually anxious for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it is not something that is blameworthy of Abu Bakr. It's just that he was anxious, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was at ease, and it's described of him that he was reading the Quran as he's leaving. What else could he do? What else could he do? And that brings us to an important point, that we need to go ahead and take all the necessary precautions, and then we need to do complete tawakkul. So there's some people, we have of course always people who cannot embody or put together these two things. One of them is that there are people who don't take the necessary precautions, and we know that is not the Islamic or the prophetic way. And then they say, I do complete tawakkul. And then there's others who don't do tawakkul. They do tawakkul. Tawakkul means reliance. Tawakkul does not mean you take it. It means reliance. So Abu Bakr, so the Prophet, so you have these people who they take all the necessary precautions, they do everything, but they don't rely, they don't put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that make sense? So they put their reliance on the means, whereas they're supposed to take the means just as the means. You're not supposed to rely upon it. So I'll give you an example. For example, if a person is traveling on a ship, on a boat in the sea, right? He's supposed to use that he's supposed to be on the boat and make sure that the water does not get on the boat, otherwise he will drown. So likewise, we're supposed to be in this dunya taking the means, but we're not supposed to put the means in our heart, otherwise we will drown in the means. Just like that person will drown in the water. Why? Because he let the water inside the boat, and that will sink the boat or the ship. Does that make sense? So we take the means, just like a fisherman, a sailor would take the boat, but don't let the water come in. So we just go ahead and take the means without having the love or the reliance upon the means into our heart and say, this is going to do it. No, we take it because this is the Islamic, the prophetic way, and we just put reliance, just like how a farmer puts reliance after he has taken the necessary means to cultivate his land, just like how the sailor does it. Everyone, everyone. So don't ever depend on the worldly means. Don't do that, because it will sink you. It will sink you both in this world, and it will sink you in terms of this world and in terms of your deen. Because what will happen is, and we mentioned this in our Aqidah class, that when you depend on the means and when it fails you, what happens to you? That person is completely devastated. So don't put your means, don't put your reliance in those means. So the Prophet ﷺ is completely at ease. And there are other instances or other stories that the Prophet ﷺ had occurred along the way, but we don't have all of those stories. There's one which happened in Qudayd. Qudayd is almost in between. So we see over here the Hajj route. So it's around right here. Where's Qudayd? Yeah, around right here. Okay. So you have this. So the Prophet ﷺ is making. Do you guys remember the Nakhla? That's where the story of the jinn happened. Okay. Ta'if. So on his way back, he goes to the Nakhla, and that is where the story of the jinn happened. This was just a few. You guys don't remember? We refer to Seerah class number, I don't know, 10 maybe, or 11. It was before Isra and Mi'raj. So the Prophet ﷺ, he goes this way, and then he makes a zigzag like this. Okay, and in Qudayd, this is about 1.5 to 2 hours away from Medina by car. And in here, he met a family, right? And this individual that he met was an older woman. She was a Bedouin. She was living in a tent in the middle of the desert, wandering around, finding food, finding water. So while her husband is away, and he's also out to find some food and to find some water, and she sees these travelers, these two people that is approaching nearby. And so they ask her for permission to come near her tent. And when she gives them or grants them the permission, she finds the Prophet ﷺ, but of course she doesn't know this is the Prophet of Allah. They're not Muslims. So Abu Bakr and the Prophet ﷺ is granted permission to go and talk to her. And so she has a few animals. She has some goats. She has some sheep with her. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Can I buy some food from you?" And it shows you the adab or the mannerism of the Prophet ﷺ, that he is asking for permission, and he's not demanding food, but rather he is asking to purchase some food. So she replies that she has nothing to give, and that her husband is away and has gone to hunt or to search for some food. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he looks at her, some of her goats, he says to her, because that goat, it was old, it looked like it was about to be slaughtered. So the Prophet ﷺ, because they used to slaughter a goat or an animal, like a cow or a goat, when it became old, and it would stop giving it milk. So some of these animals were used to give milk. They would drink it, they would eat it, they would drink it, and they would sell it, and with that money they would go ahead and buy other stuff. But this goat was an older goat, stopped giving it milk, and so it was being ready and prepared to be slaughtered. So the Prophet ﷺ, he asks permission to milk the goat. And this lady, her name is Ma'bad, she says that that the goat is past that stage. And so the Prophet ﷺ insisted if he would allow, if she would allow him. And she said, well, it doesn't hurt, go ahead and you can try. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he made dua and he moved his hand under the udder and it filled up with milk, and he milked it, he drank from it, he gave it to Abu Bakr, he gave it to the woman, and she's watching all of this in awe. When they left, her husband came, she explained the whole story of what had happened, and her husband said, these are the two Quraysh, these are the two Quraysh men whom are being hunted. These are, and one of them claims to be a prophet. So when they put one and one together, they find that indeed, look, he claims to be a prophet. The people of Makkah are hunting them down. This is what happened right in front of our eyes, or in front of Ma'bad's eyes. Then he is the prophet. So they both became Muslim and they accepted Islam. And there were other instances in which certain things happened, but we don't really have those narrations. However, what we do know is along the way, what did the Prophet ﷺ was doing? He was reciting the Quran, busy in the dhikr of Allah, and anyone that he met, he would invite them towards Islam. If they were friendly, if they were they didn't pose a threat. Initially, he would, we mentioned the road that he took. It was something that they avoided the main road. And there was, as they are continuing their journey, they passed by a caravan. So imagine you are walking in the desert for 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. You've taken a road which normally people don't take, so it's not really filled with people. It's not like caravans are passing by, but maybe there is one caravan who normally takes that for security reasons or any other reason. Maybe it's a shortcut. So they pass by this caravan, and the people they recognize, so they stop, right? So when you don't see civilization or people for a few days, you would want to go ahead and stop, maybe exchange some information, maybe exchange some water and food, so that way both can continue. So they stopped and they recognized Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu because he was a prominent business individual. So they asked Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu where they're going, what's happening, who is this person? So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he used what is called tawriya. Tawriya, it means to say a statement which has a double meaning. So Abu Bakr, so this is not a lie. It's not like he is lying, but he is saying something which has a double meaning. It doesn't give you a lie. It doesn't give you a lie. But so Abu Bakr radiallahu anh said, when he was asked, who is this man? Because they didn't recognize who is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're not from Quraysh. They're not from Makkah. They're just traveling. So they asked Abu Bakr, who is this man? And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh said, he is my guide, guiding me to the path. He's my guide, guiding me to the path. And of course, what Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu meant was, he is guiding me to Jannah. But they understood it as a normal guide. Someone who is guiding them, guiding him to another place. Okay. So this also tells us that now there are only 2 people by this time. So their initial guide, Abdullah ibn Urayqit, had left them some time before. So we find also there's a verse in the Quran in chapter 9. I forgot to mention this, verse 40. Chapter 9, verse 40. in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes what was happening to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? He describes what was happening to when he was being kicked out. He said, "Illa tansuruhu faqad nasarahu Allah." If you do not aid the Prophet, Allah has already aided him. When those who disbelieved had driven him out of Makkah, as one of two, when they were in the cave, and he said to his companion, he meaning the Prophet, "Do not grieve. Indeed, Allah is with us." Indeed, Allah is with us. So then Allah, He says, and Allah sent down His tranquility upon him and supported him with angels you did not see, and made the word of those who disbelieved the lowest, while the word of Allah, that is the highest. And Allah is exalted in might and wise. So we see over here a couple of lessons that we could derive from immediately. One of them, or a few. One of them is, if you do not aid the Prophet ﷺ, Allah will aid him. So you might be saying, well, he's not alive. Well, yeah, what about his sunnah? You don't defend his sunnah, Allah will defend his honor, his sunnah, either through someone else or through any other means. That's why we shouldn't be like the people of Quraysh when it comes to reviving, defending, protecting, practicing, safeguarding, preserving the sunnah of the Prophet. All of that comes under the umbrella of the sunnah. So you practice it, you preach it, you teach it, you preserve it. What do you mean you preserve it? You don't dilute it. You don't mix it with bid'ah, with innovation. You defend it when people talk against it, or when people would rather take something else. You defend it. You preserve it. You teach it to the people. You spread it. So if you do not aid the Prophet, Allah has already aided him. You think you are doing a service to Islam by you teaching the Seerah, by you teaching the Sunnah, by you attending a Seerah class? No. No, you don't teach it. There's going to be 100 other people better than you, more knowledgeable than you, that will go ahead and teach it in a manner that is the best if you don't do it. And if you are teaching it, but you're not teaching it the way it ought to be taught, then still. Okay, because there are people who are teaching it, but they go ahead and twist it. So if you don't attend the Seerah class, there's thousands and millions of other people that will go ahead and learn the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So if you do not aid it, Allah has already aided him and helped him. If, just like how he was kicked out of Makkah, don't kick the Prophet ﷺ out of your house. Don't kick out the Sunnah and the prophetic ways out of your house and say, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, we love you, but just don't enter our house." Right? What about our house? Is that in accordance to the Sunnah? I'm not talking about, the furnitures and all of that. What I'm talking about is everything else. What do we have in our houses? Do you think if the Prophet was to come and visit your house, that he would be pleased with what he finds? Okay. What about our weddings? What about our workplace? How you go to the Prophet. Imagine he comes and visits you. Would he be pleased with what he sees? If the answer is yes, then alhamdulillah, that is between you and yourself and Allah. You are the judge of your situation. No one can say this is like that. You know. If you are getting married, or if you had gotten married, the Prophet came to your wedding, you invited. Would you invite the Prophet to your wedding? That's the first question. Your daughters, your son is getting married. Would you invite the Prophet to your wedding? Or would you leave him out because you know? I'm talking about right now. Imagine the Prophet, he is alive, like right now, he comes. Would you invite, or would you not invite him? You will say, yeah, but only to the Masjid one, right? Not to the reception. Not to the other. So this is us kicking out the Prophet ﷺ from our lives, from our houses, from our workplace. Don't worry. The Prophet ﷺ, he is going to be accepted into the lives of other people, into the houses of other people. His religion, his sunnah is going to be practiced by others who will not be like us. So over here, then the other thing is the Prophet ﷺ, when he was in the cave, he was completely in a state of ease and comfort. Why? Because that's Allah sent down his aid, his tranquility upon him. And this is what I wanted to also mention. He told one of two. So the word that is used, okay, let me go ahead and put it here. It says, إِذْ يَقُولُ لِصَاحِبِهِ. Sahib, Sahaba, the plural of Sahaba. The plural of Sahib means, the plural of Sahib is Sahaba or Ashab. So this tells us that Allah has testified to the companionship of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And anyone who says otherwise is going against the Quran. He is going against what Allah is saying. He is not a Muslim. Anyone who says Abu Bakr was not a Sahabi, he was, wal-'iyadhu billah, he was not a Muslim. He was this and he was that. Like we find the Shia saying this. So over here, we know who was there. That's irrefutable history. No one can say, no, it wasn't Abu Bakr. Right? So even the kuffar have recognized that it was Abu Bakr who accompanied him. So he's saying to his companion. Who is his companion? Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And that tells us that Allah has testified and has acknowledged that he's a companion of the Prophet ﷺ. He was given the honor to be one of two people in that cave, the second one being the Prophet ﷺ. And so I wanted to bring your attention to this. Do not grieve. Indeed, Allah is with us. Inna Allaha ma'ana, with us. Now, when we find almost the same situation, the Exodus that was happening when Musa alayhi salam was being driven out, or when they were fleeing the Fir'aun and his army, they also told Abu Bakr, they told Musa alayhi salam, we are going to be destroyed. Look, when they came to the Red Sea, they said, there's no way to go for us to go forward. There's no way for us to go back, because in the rear of us is Fir'aun and his army. We are destroyed. And what did Musa alayhi salam, he said, indeed Allah, inna ma'i rabbi sayahdeen. Ma'i means with me. He said, Allah, he is with me. He didn't say Allah is with us, because of the level of Iman. People like Abu Bakr versus all of Bani Israel. So Musa alayhi salam, he said, Allah, he is with me, whereas the Prophet alayhi salam, he said to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, don't grieve. Indeed, Allah is with us, with me and you. And that is something very, very beautiful that he included Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu in uh, uh, by saying that Allah, He is with the both of us rather than only with uh, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at the exclusion of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So now they are as they are traveling to Medina, to Yathrib, is still called Yathrib, and we know that Yathrib was a name of Medina prior to the Prophet ﷺ renaming it. Now the question is, why did the Prophet ﷺ rename Yathrib to Al-Madinah? Because some of the scholars said Yathrib, it comes from a root letter tathrib, which means to criticize, which means evil or corruption. And it was the habit of the Prophet ﷺ, or rather it was from his nature, that he did not like bad names. He did not like superstitious names. He did not like names that gave a bad meaning. He did not like it. Once a person, his name was something that translated to being like pessimistic, and when he told the Prophet when the Prophet ﷺ asked him, "What's your name?" He said pessimistic. He said, "No, but you are optimistic." So he named him that. Okay? Also, one person, his name was the father, or rather not the father. His name was Al-Hakam, the wise. Okay, the wise. And the Prophet ﷺ, no, Allah, He is that. You cannot be that. So you are Abdul, the slave of the Most Wise. Also, there was another lady, her name translated into the sour, someone who is sour, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he changed it to sweet, right? So the Arabs, they had this superstitious belief that if someone says something good, you must say something bad. They had this superstitious belief that if someone says something good, you must say something bad. So they would go ahead and name, why would they do that? To counter the evil eye or the jealousy or this, So they would go ahead and purposefully name themselves such names so that way people could go ahead and counter it, or people wouldn't give them the evil eye. So if, for example, if that person was afraid that maybe if her name was sweet, people would give her the evil eye and say, "Oh, look, she's saying that she's sweet. May she be sour." So she went ahead and took that step and say, "Let me be sour so people can say you are so sweet." Okay? Or something similar. But the Prophet ﷺ, he got rid of these superstitious beliefs. And in fact, we have certain names like that in our culture. Unfortunately, we have some people, whether it's like, for example, I will give you one name. I know personally one person. Okay, I know one person here in Malaysia that their name is Evil Eye. Shar'ain. And that is not a proper name. That's Islamically, you have to change it. Islamically, you have to change it. Because we are not allowed to have names with bad meanings. So if your name is Shar, Shar means evil, Ain means eye. I don't know. Maybe her sister's name is Khairul Ain. I don't know. Right? But it wouldn't be far-fetched. You have another person, their name is Sharrul Bariya. And in the Quran is Khairul Bariya, describing the believers, and describing the hypocrites and the mushrikeen is Sharrul Bariya. So if you have a name which is not Islamic, and what we mean by that, a lot of people are like, it has to be, actually that person's, I don't want to give the complete name. Like for example, if your name is like, you know, not Chris, maybe not Christina either. Like for example, Sabrina. We have one of our students here, Sabrina, right? It doesn't have a bad name, a negative meaning to it. Yeah, it's not a name of a Sahabiya, but it doesn't necessarily make it an un-Islamic name. But you can have a name from the Quran, but it gives you a bad meaning. That would be more un-Islamic, or that is un-Islamic rather than a name. So a lot of people have this negative impression that a name must be from the Quran, must be from one of the Sahabi or Sahaba. That would be the best. But if your name is like Julie or Sabrina or Tom or Bob, right? Yeah, okay, none of the Sahaba were named that. But if that is what your culture, or that is what your country is, a common name, people, you can name your kids that. Of course, the best name would be like Abdullah, Abdul Rahman, Muhammad, Ahmed. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, it's haram. You can't have such a name. But for a name to sound, so, you know, like Arabic or Islamic, but it has a bad name, that is worse. Do you guys understand? So for example, Shar Ain, yes, that's Shar is an Arabic name. Ain is in the Quran, it's an Arabic name, but that is actually worse. That is worse than a name that is not named. So are you going to tell me just because Shaitan and Iblis is mentioned in the Quran, you rather use that than a name that is, you know, English or French or Spanish? It doesn't really make sense, right? So if you know someone, or if you have a child whose name is an evil name or a bad name, it gives that bad meaning to it, then you have to change it. That's the prophetic guidance. But so for example, some people, they were not Muslims before, and they had that so-called non-Islamic name, and then they came into Islam. If they want to change it, that's up to them. I would agree, you know what, go ahead and change it if that's what pleases you. But if you don't want to change it, that's as long as it doesn't have an evil or bad name, then you don't have to change it. You don't. Okay? So, like Brother Rene, I don't know what Rene would mean in German or in Spanish or any name, but I'm sure it's not a evil or bad meaning. But if
Assalamu alaikum. It comes. Sorry. It comes from the Saint Renatus. Renatus means reborn. Renatus.
Okay. All right. Inshallah.
So.
Okay. Good to know. Renato. Reborn. So you are reborn into the religion of Islam, inshallah. You are.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Mashallah.
So if it's not like, you know, some evil name, some bad name, you should not be forced. But if you want to change it, that is completely your right. So we do have some scholars say you should not change it, as if to say it's bad for you to change it. No, that I don't agree with that either. And some say you must change it. Your name, Rene, is Abdullah. I'm going to call you Abdullah, and you're going to respond to it. And that is also wrong, because Allah, He says in the Quran that we should be calling them by the names of their fathers. أُدْعُوهُمْ لِآبَائِهِمْ. So we should be calling you by a name which your parents have given you, as long as it's not like sour or evil or anything like that. And there's a few other names that the Prophet ﷺ he changed. But so coming back to Yathrib, Yathrib was a very negative name. It meant something evil or corrupt. It meant to criticize or to you know to defame. So the Prophet ﷺ he changed it. So that is why we are not allowed to call it Yathrib. We have to call it Al-Medina, the city. Okay? We are not allowed to call it Yathrib anymore. We say Yathrib pre-Hijrah, just to say that this is what it was called. But if you were to go to Medina and someone asks you where are you going, you cannot say I'm going to Yathrib. We mention Yathrib pre-Hijrah because the Prophet didn't make Hijrah and it wasn't changed. So it's okay for us to refer to it because it wasn't called Medina and the Prophet didn't live in it. So we cannot say that that city is a corrupt or evil city. So Medina had a few names that the Prophet ﷺ personally gave. One of them was Tayyiba or Taba and Tayyiba, which means pure. So the Prophet ﷺ he said in a hadith, don't say Yathrib, but rather say Taba. Also, there are many blessings of Medina. And we will mention just a few. The Prophet ﷺ he made dua for Medina and said, "O Allah, cause us to love Medina as much as we loved Makkah, or more than this." And also, it has a mountain, the mountain of Uhud, where the Prophet ﷺ said, "This is a mountain we love and it loves us." So it is a blessed mountain, and even the Prophet ﷺ said that Uhud is one of the mountains of Jannah. So it is a mountain of Jannah. It is blessed. Uhud loves us and we love Uhud. And also Dajjal, he will not be able to enter and destroy Medina. But rather Medina would be guarded by angels, preventing Dajjal from entering. And so if we hear about Dajjal, where should we go? We know where to go, Medina, right? And Medina would kick out or expel all of the hypocrites that live in there during that time. There will be an earthquake, right? That all the hypocrites will be so scared that they will go ahead and leave it. And only the pure believers will be there. And we know that this is going to happen right before the Dajjal comes. So that way only the believers will be protected. The Prophet ﷺ, he also said, no plague will ever infest Medina. No plague. So you might be wondering, what about the coronavirus? Yeah, but it's not a plague in Medina. It's a plague everywhere else. And even in Saudi, which has a very high number of the virus, it has not come into Medina as a plague. You may find 1 or 2 or 10 people having it, but it has not been declared a plague in Medina. Just like how a seasonal flu would be there. It would affect 1 or 2 people, but not as a plague where it will wipe out 10% of its population. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, no plague will ever infest Medina. And we even have so many instances where, for example, the Spanish flu killed 1/3 of the world's population, 30%. of the world's population at the time. But it did not come into Medina due to the Prophet ﷺ's dua. The Prophet ﷺ also made dua that Medina is blessed. He said, "O Allah, give us barakah in the city of ours." O Allah, your servant declared Makkah a haram or a haram. I too am your servant, so I make dua that you make Medina a haram or a haram. So this Medina is also a haram. And what does haram mean? Haram means anything that is sacred, that there are certain things which outside of the city would be halal, but inside the city it will be haram. The Prophet ﷺ, he also made dua to Allah to bless the food of Medina. What does that mean? He made dua, "O Allah, bless the food of Medina," so that it means so it can suffice the people. And it can suffice more people than its inhabitants. So it can suffice more people than its inhabitants. The Prophet ﷺ, he also made dua. "O Allah, make Medina double the blessings of Makkah." Double the blessings of Makkah. Make Medina double the blessings of Makkah. But does this mean that Medina is more blessed than Makkah? Well, some of the scholars said, no, Makkah is more holier. Why? Because it has the Kaaba, and because one salah is equal to 100,000 times in reward. But other scholars said, no, Medina is more blessed than Makkah. Like, for example, Imam Malik. Imam Malik was considered to be the mufti of Medina. He lived there. He was a scholar of the first century. He saw those who saw the Sahaba. So he was a tabi'een. And he was one of the greatest scholars of Islam, the Maliki school of law, of fiqh, is based upon his madhab. So he was of the opinion that Medina was more blessed than Makkah due to this dua of the Prophet ﷺ. Also the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Iman, faith, returns to Medina like a desert animal returns to its hole. And subhanAllah, when Islam is attacked, Medina will be the place where Iman is protected. Medina is the place where people will run to safeguard their Iman. And also the Prophet ﷺ, he said in Hadith of Bukhari and Muslim, no one should plot to harm Medina except Allah dissolves him like salt in water. Meaning anyone who tries to harm Medina, his plot will be dissolved. He will be caught. His plot will fail him. How many plots were concocted throughout history to either attack Medina, even in our current times, just maybe about 6 years ago, right? There was a huge plot by the Shia, maybe even more, about 8 years ago, I think. I wasn't there at that month. I think I came a couple weeks afterwards. There was a whole bunch of Shias that were actually staging a revolt in the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. I think this was in 2012. 2012? Yeah. And subhanAllah, it was completely foiled. It was completely foiled. The police came, they gathered some intelligence. So they, forget about the police, the National Guard came, the army. They arrested a whole bunch of people. So you have, in Makkah, you had the takeover of Makkah, but you didn't have that kind of takeover in Medina. Right? In 1979, when Juhayman, actually took over Makkah along with several hundreds of his followers with guns and grenades. They took over Makkah in the time of Hajj, and the whole people were taken as hostages, and then it was like that for a few weeks until the government took it back from them. Right? But you didn't have that in Medina. So the Prophet ﷺ, he made that special dua for Medina. And also the Prophet ﷺ, he said in Sahih al-Bukhari, whoever does a crime in Medina, helps a criminal, introduces an innovation, he shall have the curse of Allah, the angels and all of mankind, and Allah will not accept any fard or nafal deed of his. So this is a huge warning, a dangerous warning to individuals that we're not supposed to even introduce. So imagine those people who go to Medina and they do all kinds of bid'ah and acts of innovation. So instead of gaining the reward of 1,000 salah for every single prayer that they do, they're actually gaining the curse of Allah and His angels and all of mankind. What does it mean, all of mankind? It means, you know, when we make dua, that, oh Allah, curse the wrongdoers, curse the sinners. Our dua is going to those people. So don't let other people's curse come to you by you introducing an innovation, by you doing something. We already know the dangers of doing innovation. But when that is compounded with doing it in the city of the Prophet ﷺ, it is indeed very, very scary. Also, it is a blessed place to live in. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in Bukhari that Medina is better for them if they only knew. No one leaves it not wanting to live there except Allah replaces him with someone better. And he who is patient with the difficulties of Medina, meaning the very hot and very cold weather during the seasons, food is only seasonal, and so on, I will be an intercessor for him. So the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever is patient with the difficulties of Medina, I will be an intercessor for him. I know of one individual at least that he lived in Medina for 20 years, or maybe more than that. Maybe more than. I met him in 2003 when I went. And he was, I told him, I said, I want to move here. I want to make Hijrah. And he was like, what are you going to do? You're better off over there and don't come here. Even me, I'm leaving. I'm going to try to find someplace else. And I have enough money to go and this and that. So this was in 2003. So he traveled to a country where he was doing his initial plans to move. And subhanAllah, he lived in Medina for more than 20 years. Yeah, I think more than 20 years at the time. And the story is 20 years old almost. So he was all of his kids were born in Medina. Everything. His whole life, he had so many stores in Taiba market. So this person, he was talking negative and it was putting me down because I'm like, I want to move here. And this guy, he's actually discouraging me. Wallahi, this person, this is a true story. I know this. This is a personal story. This person, after a few months, he went to another country to make that initial move. And subhanAllah, he had a fever and he died immediately. Imagine living in Medina, trying to gain the honor of all of these blessings, right? To be, and the biggest, one of the biggest is to be buried in Jannat al-Baqiyah. And yet this person, because he is not wanting to live there, because he has this negative attitude of it, Allah replaced him with someone better. No one leaves it not wanting to live there, except that Allah will replace him with someone better. And that was very, very scary. And right now, all of his sons, all of his kids, they're still in Medina. So Allah safeguarded his family from being kicked out, but for being divinely kicked out. Living in Medina, trying to get all that reward, and then towards the end of your life, Allah makes you have a want or a need in a particular country, so you could meet your end over there and not in Medina. He was going to die in, let's say, in July anyway. Imagine if he had stayed instead of, may Allah forgive him, may Allah have mercy upon him, right? But that was something that was a wake-up call. Don't ever talk negative like that. Also, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, whoever amongst you is able to die in Medina, let him do so, because I will intercede for him on a day of judgment. Now, just, to live, it's a huge blessing, but to die in Medina is just as a huge blessing, if not more. So we know the famous dua that Umar radiallahu anhu was making. He said, "Oh Allah, I want to die as a shaheed in Medina." And people were like, the front lines is not in Medina. The front lines, the enemies are thousands of kilometers away to the north and not even to the south in Yemen. All of them to the northeast and to the northwest. But yet he wanted both of them. He wanted shahada, martyrdom, and also to die in Medina. And he was sincere in it. And Allah gave him both. And to top it all off, he is buried next to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's buried next to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. And also we have like in Jannatul Baqiyah, how many Sahaba are buried there? Some of the scholars said there's about 10,000 Sahaba, including all the wives, except for Khadija. All of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ are buried there. The Prophet ﷺ's sons, his grandsons, his great-grandsons, the Prophet ﷺ's aunt, Safiya, all of these great scholars of Islam throughout time, so much barakah even just in the graveyard of the Prophet ﷺ. I asked one person who lived in Medina for 40 plus years, 45 years. I said, is it true that once a person, he dies and, when the graveyards are filled, then they go ahead, just to initially fulfill the prophetic sunnah, they bury him, but then after everything is filled, then they go ahead, after a few years, they remove the bones and then they go and bury someone else to make place? He said, no, that's not true. Once you're buried there, you're never taken out. So I said, but what about the bones? He said, after a few years, the body has already become dust, and not completely dust, bones. So they will just go ahead and move the bones to the side and then bury this person. They will do this in phases. And then repeat. And then by the time they repeat, it's already a couple of years, and then the same thing will happen. This is what they have been doing. So I used to hear that you only are buried there for 2 or 3 years, and afterwards they go ahead and remove you and bury you somewhere else. So Medina is also a haram, just like Makkah is. Now, what does haram is also, you could say haram. So you could say Masjidul Haram, or you could say Masjidul Haram. It's the same thing. It means the same thing. So what does haram mean? Haram means forbidden. It also means sacred. So why is Medina called haram? Isn't that like a negative name? No. What it means is that anything that is halal outside of it will become haram inside of it. So for example, carrying weapons. Carrying weapons is halal for you to do it anywhere else, except for you to have weapons inside of Makkah and Medina. Armies cannot come to try to conquer it. Why? Because it's haram. Even the Prophet ﷺ, when he was conquering Makkah, when he was doing the conquest of Makkah, he said that Allah has given me permission to enter with an army for a very small period of time. So there was a period of time which Allah made it halal for him. But then for anyone after the Prophet ﷺ, it is not permissible. And we know when Imam Mahdi comes, there will be an army sent to crush him. And that army will actually be swallowed on their way to Makkah. And that is one of the major signs that he is the true Mahdi. Because in 1979, when Juhayman tried to take over, he took over, he said, we have the Mahdi. And it wasn't like a joke. They really believed they had the Mahdi because all of the apparent signs were in him. And that person was his own brother-in-law. He was Qahtani. He was from the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ. His name was Muhammad. His father's name was Abdullah. He was well known. He was a person of knowledge. And he was around that age where Imam Mahdi is to come, but he meaning he was not a kid or a teenager. So he was of that age. So a lot of people, they truly believe it's not like, something that for just political reasons, let me go ahead and use this as an excuse to justify my agenda or my goal. No, they actually believed it. The person, he initially didn't believe it. He said, no, what are you guys talking about? I'm just a regular guy. He got convinced. He said, okay. So what happened is a lot of the scholars were on edge. When they heard this, they were like, yeah, well, they know who he was. He wasn't like some stray person, some person who people didn't know. So you can imagine the confusion and the fitna that it caused. 1979, a lot of things happened. So you have to know the world stage at that time. Russia was at its peak and it invaded Afghanistan. Iran, they had that revolution. Just a couple years prior to that, there was the huge oil embargo against the US and the West. Just a few years ago, Palestine was under siege and a lot of land was taken by the Jews. And then this happened, so people were like, well, it has to be it because all of these so big world, changing stuff are happening. So Mahdi is going to come at this time to save us. And that is actually a mentality of the defeatist. When you say, I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to wait for Imam Mahdi to do. Anyway, that's besides the point. The point is, you can see how people were looking forward to that. So the scholars, they were on edge. Some, of course, they denied him. They said he's this. Others supported him, and others were neutral. They say, wait, let us wait. And what were they waiting for? Well, the army was being sent from the Saudi government was sending in an army. So they said, let us wait, because if this army is swallowed up, then we know he's the Mahdi. And there's nothing anyone could do to stop it. But if it is not swallowed, then we know he's the fake Mahdi, because many people like him came as well. So when the army was sent with tanks and everything, nothing happened. But yeah, now looking back, we could say, all right, if he was fake and everything, but at that time, what was the reaction? The reaction was, and in 1979, there wasn't like YouTube or even TV. TV was just recently introduced in the kingdom. So that is what it means, haram. You can't send in an army. You cannot. Right? So it's haram. But of course, for the government to do so, that was okay because there's a reason for it. To cut down a tree is haram outside of Makkah and Medina, but inside you can't. You cannot. If something you see it on the ground, you cannot pick it up. Outside of Makkah and Medina, it's halal for you to pick it up, look for its owner, or even put it in the lost and found area, and then that people are going to go and get it from there. So there's a lot of things, you guys, that is halal outside, but when it comes to even plucking grass, you can't do that. It's haram. Many things are haram inside Makkah and Medina. It's sacred. It's why? Because it's supposed to be a place where the animals, the plants, the humans are supposed to feel at peace and security. That is the whole concept, that you're supposed to feel at ease and security there. So, and imagine, like for example, it's permissible for you to like yell and discipline your kids. To discipline your kids. People discipline in many ways, like yell at them. You can't do that in Makkah and Medina. My son is telling me, let's go to Makkah. But you can't do that. Why? Because you are disrupting that peace. So what would some of the people do? They would take their kids outside of Makkah or Medina, discipline them there, and then bring them back. Right? So a lot of things, of course, it's completely permissible, halal for us to yell and discipline and get upset with our family when it is for a just reason. But in Makkah and Medina, everyone is supposed to be at peace, right? You might be saying, what about now? A lot of the trees are being cut down. Well, if it's like I've mentioned, if it's for a reason that is Islamically justified, like for example, they're building and constructing the masjid and expanding it, so they have to break this and cut down this tree, it's completely permissible, right? But what I'm mentioning is, you don't like this tree is old, you want to get it out of the way, you can't do that. Or you're sitting down in a small, like grassy area, and some people just have the habit of plucking out the grass. You can't do that. Anyway, so the Prophet ﷺ, he chose Medina, and because of him, he chose Yathrib, and because of him, it was named Al-Madinah, and it was made a Haram. And we mentioned a couple reasons, or a few reasons. Actually, we only mentioned a couple reasons why the Prophet ﷺ, he chose Medina. First, we said the strategic location. It was reasonably close to Makkah. We also mentioned that from a military standpoint, that it was surrounded, it was protected from three sides. It was protected by volcanoes. It was protected from volcanoes. It was protected by the palm trees. And so the only part that was exposed, so it was protected on the east and west, right? East and west by the volcanoes, and the south was protected by the date palm trees. And so the north, this will be important. I'm mentioning this because it will be important in one of the battles. It will be important in one of the battles. Why in the battle of the trench? So the Prophet ﷺ, that's why he only had to dig the trench in the north, because that was the only exposed area. He didn't dig a trench all over 360 degrees. Okay? So that is a very important strategic. So militarily, that's why he chose it. Also, the people of Medina were never colonized. They were never conquered. So they had this very strong, independent spirit. And so this independent spirit was ingrained in them, which meant that they were going to truly protect Islam and the Prophet ﷺ and spread it. And also, Medina was chosen because of the young generation that was springing over there. We mentioned the Battle of Bu'ath, or the War of Bu'ath, that was there for many years. Some scholars even said 40 or 50 years. Some said 100, some said 10, but whatever it is, the major, or the elders, the tribal elders, they had all been annihilated and they were all killed. Also, the Prophet ﷺ, he had, I don't know if you guys remember this, he had a direct blood connection with the people of Medina. His great-great-grandmother was from the Khazraj tribe. Do you guys remember when I think it was the first or the second lesson that we had, where one of his great-great-grandfathers, Hashim, he would go to Syria, he would go to Palestine to do some business, and on the way, it's Medina, so he would go from Makkah to through Medina, and on his way, once on his way, he met a very beautiful woman. Her name was Salma. She was a business lady. She was beautiful, so he married her, but she had set a condition, and that is, you cannot take me to Makkah. I want to stay in Medina. Isn't that the attitude even now? Right? Who wants to go to? Why do we leave Medina till the end? Because once we are done with everything, we just want to go to Medina. Once we are done with everything in Makkah, with the rituals, with the Hajj, or even the Umrah, then we go to Medina to relax and just enjoy the beautiful tranquility and serenity that's there. And if we can, we would just stay there and then just perform Umrah whenever we want to, once a month, or whenever possible. So you could imagine that's how the people were. They're like, we're not going to go to Makkah. So her condition is, I will marry you, but with the condition that I will stay in Medina, and all of my children will stay in Medina, and I will remain a businesswoman. And so they were together for a very short period of time. She felt pregnant with a son called Shayba. Okay, so when his father died, when Hashim died, Al-Muttalib, the brother of Hashim, he goes into Medina. He finds this young boy. He says, who's your father? He proudly says, my father is Hashim. So he takes this boy back to Makkah. Remember we said he bribes the mother? How does he bribe the mother? He tells the mother, listen, he's going to be someone who is going to have a very prominent role. He's going to be like the prince of Makkah. He's going to be someone great. And in a way, it did become true. In a way, it did become true. Because he did. Who was that kid? That kid was none other than Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ. Because when Al-Muttalib, when he went inside Makkah with this young boy, they didn't recognize who he was. They didn't know that Hashim had a boy in Medina. So when they asked him, who is this? And he didn't answer, they started calling him so they thought that he was the slave or the servant boy that he just bought in Medina or in one of his travels. He bought him. Now he brought him to Makkah. That's his slave. So they called him Abdul Muttalib, the slave or the servant of Al-Muttalib. So Al-Muttalib was the uncle of Abdul Muttalib, but his real name was Shayba. Go ahead and read just the first few pages, and just to refresh your memory, and it will make more sense. It will make more sense. Also, the other reason that it was because of this uniqueness, this unique combination of the Jews and the Arabs that were there. The Jews and the Arabs. You might be wondering, who are these Jews? Where did these Jews come from? Okay. There's a lot of opinions, or there's a lot of theories where they came from. Some of them said that the Jews, they came from those tribes that were sent by Musa alayhi salam himself. That Musa alayhi salam, he sent a small group to this land because he knew the prophet, the last prophet, would come, be coming from Arabia. So he sent them over there. Okay, so that is one. That is one theory. Another theory is that the Jews of Medina settled in Medina after they were expelled from Jerusalem. We have two major expulsions happen, right, around 500 years. Within 500 years, many expulsions happen. So one of the expulsions were because of the Christians and the Iranians, the Christians and the Sassanid Empire. Okay, so they were expelled in due to various circumstances. There's many theories. I'm not going to go into all of them, but one of the theory is that that they found in their books during the expulsions, that rather before the expulsions, they found in their books that there's going to be a last prophet coming. The last prophet is going to come, because remember, this happened after Isa alayhi salam. Even these two expulsions happened after Isa alayhi salam. So like year 70, I think, and another was in the year 500 something. Okay, so this happened after Isa alayhi salam, and they knew that the last prophet was going to come in Arabia, from the land where the date palm trees grow. And where are the date palm trees? In Arabia, Khaybar, and in Medina. And these are the only two places where the Jews settled, Khaybar and Medina. Those were the two places that the Jews eventually went there, and through business and the money influence that they had, they bought a lot of land, and they made deals with the different tribes of the Arabs. So they allied themselves with the various tribes, which we mentioned, the Aus and the Khazraj. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he arrived, before I mentioned when he arrived, the Prophet ﷺ, he came to a city that already had both the Jews and the Arabs living there. How many Jews were there? How many Jews? Some of the scholars said, when they did their rough estimate, they said about 2,000 Jews lived in Medina. About 2,000. Some said 5,000, 6,000. So let's go ahead and take 5,000. What about the Arabs? Well, we know that in the conquest of Makkah, so this is how they go ahead and do their calculation. We know in the conquest of Makkah, there were about 5,000 Ansar that took part in that conquest of Makkah. So if it's 5,000 Ansar, then with their wives and their children, you could say about 15,000 Ansar lived in Medina, 5,000 of the Jews. That gives you a rough estimate of about 20,000 people living in Yathrib. I'm mentioning all of this so you building this this picture, or this kind of landscape, this type of vision, not vision, but this type of mental picture. So you guys can know both the topography, the landscape. The landscape was very luscious. It was full of date palm trees. The water was abundant. The water, actually, some of the historians said that it's not like right now. No, it was very luscious. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said towards the end of time that Medina will return to being lush greenery like it was before. So it's not like, you know, Medina was always like this. It was very green. So they had water flowing. Oases. Medina was full of oases. They had water everywhere. From mountains, it would be coming. Streams would be flowing in various gardens. So people would go and cool off over there and take water. And you will find many ahadith in which there will be disputes over water. Like this person, he is stopping the water that is coming, that he's stopping the water from coming into my land, and so on. So it gives you that kind of a picture of Medina. So the Prophet ﷺ, the news is spreading. There's so many people that are every single day, they would go out in the morning to the outskirts of Medina. They would wait there until about duha time, which is when the sun would become very hot. So you could say 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, where the sun would become unbearable. Then they would go back home. So they would all go out. All of the men, all of the children, they would go every single day. When they heard from the time that the Prophet ﷺ is setting out from Makkah, they would go every day expecting his arrival. But when the sun got too hot, they would go back to their houses. So one day they waited for him, but went back to their house when they didn't see him in the horizon. And the Prophet ﷺ, he appeared after the Ansar had already gone back inside their homes. So one of the Jews, he actually saw in the distance that these two riders are coming. He saw them because he was on the top of a date palm tree plucking the dates from there. So he was the first to see in the distance that the Prophet ﷺ was coming, and the excitement of seeing the Prophet, he started shouting to the people. He said, "Oh Arabs, your king has come." And he says, "Your king." He says, "Your king." Why would he say your king and not our king? Because from the beginning, they never expected the Prophet ﷺ to be their king. They never expected him. They thought that, you know, the last prophet is going to come from them, from their own. So when they later on found out, you know, during the last 2 years that the prophet is actually from the Arabs and now he's making the Hijrah, they lost that hope. And that's why the Jews, for the most part, they did not believe as a tribe or as a nation, whatever you want to call it. They never believed in the Prophet ﷺ, so they never referred to him as our king or anything like that. They said that he is your king. So the Ansar, when they heard this, they rushed out in hordes. They rushed out in the dozens or even in the hundreds. And the Prophet ﷺ, he entered Quba, which is right on the outskirts. And of course, Quba is the furthest point of, it's a city now, but at that time, Quba was right in the outskirts. So you would hit Quba first and then you would enter Medina. So all of the Ansar were all dressed up and they all came out. Some of the Sahaba said 500 of us, we came out to greet the Prophet ﷺ. Some of them were armed. Some of them were dressed to accompany the Prophet ﷺ. The women, they had climbed their houses the rooftop of their houses to get a glimpse of the Prophet ﷺ. He was surrounded by all of these people who started to believe in him or who already had believed in him. And so now, for the first time, you find how that there is this welcoming, there is this glimmer of hope, this beauty, like, look, this is what it means to be amongst people of like mind, of people that will go ahead and accept you and help you, and even instead of fighting with one another to kill you, they're fighting with one another, or rather they are competing with one another to support you and to help you and to take you to their houses. So the Prophet ﷺ, he entered in Medina on the 12th of Rabiul Awwal. But again, this date is not really preserved, right? Because remember, there was no calendar at that time. The calendar will happen now. So this is because we mentioned before, the calendar was major incident. So when did this happen? It happened 12 years after the year of the elephant. When did this happen? It happened 10 years after the Hijrah. So now Umar radiallahu anhu, even right now, it's not really set. It was 20 years later that Umar radiallahu anhu, he set the Hijrah as a reference point where people can use from now on. So it's not like, okay, the Prophet ﷺ, he made Hijrah and then he announced this is year 00. No, it's not even, that's not even their concern. That wasn't even on their minds. It was just 20 or even 15 years later, Umar radiallahu anhu used it as a reference, as a reference point. So the Ansar, they took the Prophet ﷺ into Medina, and every Sahabi, he wanted him to live with them. But the Prophet ﷺ, he said that, so they would grab a hold of the Prophet, or they would grab a hold of the camel, the rein of the camel of the Prophet ﷺ, and they would try to steer it towards their way. And the Prophet said, leave the camel alone, for the camel is being directed by Allah. He's being commanded. Wherever the camel sits, that is where I'm going to stay. That is where the masjid is going to be built, and anyone's house that is closer to the masjid, that is the place I will go ahead and be staying at. So when the camel finally sat at its designated place that was inspired by Allah, the Prophet ﷺ, he asked, who is the closest person to this place? Or who amongst, and then Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, he said, I am. And Abu Ayyub, interestingly, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu anhu, he was a very distant cousin, the 6th cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Arabs, they had already memorized their genealogy. They knew whose father, their great-grandfather. How many of us know the names of our great-grandfather? If we know, that's good. If we don't, if you know the name of your great-grandfather, that's great. But what about your great-great-grandfather? Right? It really stops just at our 2nd or maybe 3rd grandfather. But they knew their genealogy. So they already knew that Abu Ayyub al-Ansari was a 6th cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ, he decided to stay with Abu Ayyub al-Ansari and honored him with he stayed with him for about 6 months. 6 months. They had a 2-story house, and so the Prophet ﷺ, he was given the downstairs. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari and his wife was given the so they were upstairs. And so once Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, he thought to himself, how dare I be above the Prophet, and my feet is above the head of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. right? So out of like so much worry, um, he went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "O Prophet of Allah, I just realized that we are actually walking above you, meaning our feet is actually above your head, and I do not feel comfortable." So the Prophet, so he told the Prophet ﷺ, "O Prophet of Allah, you go and move upstairs." But the Prophet ﷺ said, "The bottom floor is more easier for me because he had a lot of guests coming. He had people coming." Remember, this is now not only the Prophet, right, where he has to teach people. He is the head of state. This is where the constitution of Medina, the first constitution, what is actually now is called the first constitution, but he wrote a treaty, right? And some of the people said that is considered to be the constitution of Medina. He wrote that, so he was meeting various people, and so the Prophet ﷺ said, "But this is easier for me." But Abu Ayyub, he insisted. He said, "We can never ever be on top of you on a roof that your head is below us." So you know, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Okay." So he went upstairs, and Abu Ayyub al-Ansari and his wife moved downstairs. But you could just imagine how their extreme love and their concern for the well-being of the Prophet ﷺ was there. They were truly called the Ansar. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari and his wife, anytime they cooked something, they would actually send it to the Prophet ﷺ first, and then they would eat the leftover. And Abu Ayyub, he would eat exactly from the place where the Prophet ﷺ would eat, so that way he could get more of the blessings. Once he sent some food, but it came back the way it was. So he got so worried that he went upstairs to the Prophet ﷺ. He said, "Did we do anything wrong? Is the food not to your liking?" He said, "No, the food has garlic," meaning raw garlic. "And I cannot eat raw garlic because uh, of the people I meet." Because the people I meet, what does that mean? Meaning the angels, right? The angels do not, he doesn't even want to eat it because of it bothers the angels. And that might come as a surprise to some of you. How can the angels, well, don't we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said that whoever eats garlic should not come to the masjid? Why do you think that is? Isn't, you might be saying, well, that's for the people. Yeah, it's both for the people and the angels, because the angels, they get upset or they get bothered by anything that we get bothered. So anything that is smelly, anything that is like dirty, anything that is foul, they get bothered by it. They're pure. They don't go to the bathrooms. They don't enter. When you're entering, they leave, or not leave, but they are outside. Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ, he's meeting not only the people, but he's also meeting Jibreel, for example. So you have this etiquette of the Prophet ﷺ. Garlic is not haram. You can eat raw garlic even, but as long as you don't enter the masjid, or if you have to go to the masjid, just brush your teeth and remove the smell of it. So the Prophet ﷺ, he stays in the house of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. Just very quickly, the Prophet ﷺ, when he had his camel sit down in that particular place, that place was belonged to two orphans. For your guys' homework, mashallah, you guys, no one did the homework last, or the quiz, so I feel like I'm a bit upset because you guys didn't do it, except for two of you. One last night sent me something, and one today, this morning. No one really sent me anything, but let's see how it comes out. Your homework. Who are those two orphans? Who are those two orphans? Find me their names. Right? Or maybe that's a bit too hard. Yeah, well, khair. At least try. Don't tell me you guys couldn't find the names of the two women that had accepted Islam or gave the pledge. Don't tell me that, because that is very easy. The pledge of Aqaba was very, very, it's so famous. Everyone knows who were the people, and especially two women who had given him the pledge. In any case, it belonged to two orphans, and the Prophet ﷺ, he said, how much is it? And they said that, O Prophet of Allah, this is a gift to Allah from us. But we know already the Prophet ﷺ, he wasn't going to operate like this. He said, no, I will only take it with its due price. The Prophet never took advantage. And you have people, unfortunately, astaghfirullah, you do have people who, because of their religious position or their religious standing in the community, they say, brother, give your whole life for Allah and how, and that person is new into the religion, for example, and this imam or this sheikh or this religious person, he comes and he says, give for the sake of Allah, without really taking into consideration their need or their circumstances as well, right? So if it was like a millionaire, yeah, you want to go ahead and take, a good amount of money from that person for sadaqah, for charity, for the orphan. But if it's an orphan, you don't take advantage of the orphans because of your religious standing and use their religion. You guys understand? So if it's like a millionaire and he wants to give like half his wealth, alhamdulillah, I will be happy anytime. Just let me know. I will come and make dua for him, give him all the rewards. I will do that. But when it's a poor guy, no way I should be giving it to him. I should be collecting for him. And we see how the Prophet ﷺ, he has that same. When he's doing fundraising for the battles, when he's doing fundraising for the masjid, you have him not rejecting anything. From Uthman radiallahu anhu, who keeps on giving him 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 3 times. Why? Because Uthman, he's a millionaire, he's a billionaire, he has that money. Good, alhamdulillah. But he's not asking him for more. He just keeps on saying, in general, anyone else? And Uthman comes. Anyone else? And Uthman comes. He's not rejecting it. So we never, although always, most of the hadith, in many of the hadith, we find the Prophet ﷺ exhorting people to give for the sake of Allah. But you need to understand the circumstances of the people, right? If a millionaire gives half of his wealth, he's still a millionaire. If a person who owns 10 ringgits only, he gives half, you see, it's like, what is he going to do with 5 ringgits? So you see that huge, so the Prophet ﷺ, he said, no, I'm going to give you the price for it. The price, he wasn't going to do that. So he bought it, he negotiated a price, he gave them what is the right of that place, and that is where he started to go ahead and start building a masjid. There were some trees, he cut those trees down. There was a couple of graveyards. He removed the bones from those graveyards, and that tells us that it is permissible for us to dig up a grave and bury it somewhere else. It is permissible if it is for a legitimate reason. Who decides? The scholars decides if it is for a legitimate reason, not you who is trying to build it. Okay? And because this was a decision from Allah that this is where the masjid needs to be built, So it is completely legitimate. So we also mentioned that you cannot cut down any trees in the Haram in Makkah and Medina except for except in a necessary situation such as building a masjid. Now let me just go ahead and show you some of the house or some of like the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. So it had three main entrances. Three main entrances. They were called Babur Rahma. But it's even until now you could find it. I tried to Google it. You still have those pillars inside the masjid, or rather outside of the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. You could see Babul Rahma, Babul Jibril, and Babul Nisa. So three main entrances coming into. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he put these were the, you know, like the, what is it called? The trunk, not the trunk. But these were the date palm trees that he used as pillars. And then he put, you know, so this was about 100 feet by 130 feet, so not exactly a square. Roughly about 1,300 square feet. And the Prophet ﷺ, so this is another. So you have 1, 2, and then 3. 1, 2, and 3. This is Babu. This is Suffa, Ashabu Suffa. This is where the Ashabu Suffa used to sit and pray. This is where, and so you find that this is the house of the Prophet ﷺ. You see how green it is. Beautiful. Okay. This is another animation. And you have the Prophet ﷺ. Okay. One entrance, and then one from here, and then one from here. You have this as well. But also I checked a few online. Let me share. So we have Bab Jibril, Babun Nisa. Okay, these are all. There was another one I wanted to show you. Yeah, so this is the Prophet ﷺ. Where is it? Right here. So this is where the Prophet ﷺ's, this is the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. This was the musalla, meaning this is where the Prophet, this is where he would pray. This was his house. Okay. This is where he would pray. This was his mimbar. This was the platform of adhan. All of these pillars are there. You could see it. You could see it. You would be able to see it. This was the mimbar of the Prophet ﷺ. But now, where is the present mihrab? The present mihrab is here. This is where the imam. This happened 100 years after the Hijrah. So in the year 96, one of the Umayyad kings, or one of the Umayyad Khalifa, he expanded it greatly. Like really expanded. This is Bab Jibril right here. Okay. Now this brings us to something very important. Some people say that the Prophet ﷺ, he's buried in the masjid, and therefore it is permissible for us to also make a graveyard. No, the Prophet ﷺ specifically forbade, and he even cursed the people that build a masjid upon their prophets. He cursed them. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was not buried in the masjid. He was buried in his house. He was buried in his house. It's just so happened that in the time of Abu Bakr, the masjid didn't get expanded. Umar, he expanded it just a little bit. Uthman expanded it very much. The Umayyad, they did a great expansion to the point where they even did it. They did it to the point where they included the house of the Prophet ﷺ, meaning they did it in all four directions. Whereas whereas Umar and Uthman, they only did it like this, in this direction. So just in, I think, 3 directions. So they did it. They didn't even move it up forward. They just moved it. They kept on moving it to the west, to the north, and also to the east. They didn't do it towards the Qibla. But it was the Umayyad, I think his name was Al-Walid. He was the one that went ahead and completely expanded it. Uthman radiallahu anhu, he did an expansion that was 50% of what it was. And we know now it is just a complete, in 1980, what we see now was built in the 1980s. Complete overhaul of everything. That was the whole Medina, by the way. And inshallah, next week I want to really I really want to show you guys more about this right here. How the Prophet ﷺ is buried. Which one is the Prophet? Which one is Abu Bakr? This was the house of the Prophet ﷺ. So he was buried in his house. But I will tell you, I will mention that actually what you see, right? What you see here like this, through the holes, is actually this is the wrong one. But what you see over here through these holes, it's not it's not the graveyard, it's not the tomb of the Prophet ﷺ. So a lot of people, they go ahead and they think that they're seeing. What I will describe to you guys is that there's actually 3 different walls covering the Prophet ﷺ's grave. 3, I think 4. And this person, he does an amazing job, right? So this is what you see. So this is 1, then this is 2, and this is 3, and then I think this is the 4th one. And on top of it is that green dome is completely blocked. This is, no one has the keys, by the way. All the kings that have built this, they all throw away the keys. No one has the keys to open it. You would have to demolish it. But who would go ahead and disrespect that? So you could see how they try to, out of an abundance of caution, they try to seal the Prophet ﷺ house as much as they can from the masjid. So that way the shirk never happens. And people never think. So it's so insulated that you know, so people over here, when they are praying, it's not like they're praying to the Prophet ﷺ's grave, and because that's haram. It's completely haram. You can't pray like that. So they insulated it for so many reasons. One of them is because of the aqidah of the people. And inshallah, from here, remind me to go ahead and show you guys. Remind me to show you guys the video. If you guys want, I can go ahead and show it now, or we'll wait until next week. Inshallah, we will end off. If there's any questions, we'll take some questions. If not, then we will call it. Actually, next week there is no class. But before I mention the announcement, let me just finish it off. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين.